And last night I actually tried to make some Instant Pot baked beans because we were out of our canned beans, and my daughter was like, "What are these, Mom? We need the canned beans." Hello everyone, today we are canning baked beans. Beans are easily my favorite thing to can. When you consider the cost effectiveness, it allows me to get the most bang for my buck, reduce our waste because it's just a glass jar that gets rinsed and reused, and it's also a great option for convenience items. I love to can regular plain beans, but also baked beans and refried beans, and they make the easiest sides that I can just pull out and have something completely homemade with no extra added junk ingredients, with very little effort. If you've never canned beans, hear me clear. They are simple and easy, but time consuming, which is why it usually takes me a while to work myself up to this task, and then I can beans for a few days and then I'm done for a long time. I am doubling this batch of baked beans today because I think that'll get us through a whole year, and then I won't have to do it again. I had these beans soaking overnight. There are ways to do a quick soak method that involve boiling it and then I think just soaking for about an hour. But the process of canning beans takes long enough as is that I don't want to add an extra step to the day of canning. So I just fill this with water, I soak them in there. If you have the presence of mind, you can drain the water and add some more one more time. But as long as they're in the fridge overnight, my beans have never gone rancid or bad. If you're leaving them on the counter, I know some people that do that, and I would definitely keep up with rinsing them and refilling them more. Soaking them overnight is important because when they're in the jar and they start to take up moisture, they can get too big if they haven't had a chance to soak up moisture beforehand. So this just kind of helps the bean get closer to what its size will be when it's done canning, which can affect the safety and the shelf life and all of that. So don't skip that step. Also, I will be canning out of this book today. In general, I avoid online canning recipes. I guess I'm sort of a novice canner. I've been canning for a few years, and I'm not to the point where I feel safe using online recipes just because I don't know the person. And you know, occasionally if it's a really trusted source like Homesteading Family, I will use it, but I much prefer books. So we're gonna be making the simple baked beans. This is a tried and true. We had this all year last year and my daughter loves it. And last night I actually tried to make some Instant Pot baked beans because we were out of our canned beans, and my daughter was like, "What are these, Mom? We need the canned beans." So canned beans it is. I've got onions chopped here and I am going to weigh them out. Okay, I don't have nearly enough yet for this double batch. I'm gonna cut one more up, and then we will add the bacon and the onions into our pot. I mentioned before that I can on a hot plate. This is the Cadco hot plate. I can link it below if you are in the same predicament as me and need to find a good one. I have a glass cooktop and you know, like an electric stove, and I'm just not comfortable canning on it. We don't own this house, and I really didn't want to have to risk breaking that stove and replacing it when it's not even our stove. So I have this set up instead, and it has worked beautifully. It's actually been really nice on nights when I'm canning and cooking dinner because the canning stuff can just do its thing off to the side here, and I can just cook on the stove. For this double batch, it's taking about 2.5 large onions to hit the right weight. Whenever possible, I do prefer to can with weights rather than cups because you can be much more precise. Here I have 2 pounds of bacon that I've chopped up. I'm gonna kind of crumble it in there so it's not all stuck together. One thing about this hot plate is it does take a while to heat up, but when it gets going, it works just as well as a gas range would. All right, I'm gonna have to get in here with a spoon a little bit and make sure this all breaks up. Here go the onions. One thing that does help me a lot mentally on a big canning day like this is to stage as much as you can the night before. So I did my best to clean my kitchen the night before. I pulled up my hot plate and canning pot and pressure cooker, not pressure cooker, pressure canner, all of that beforehand. And if you have an empty dishwasher that you can kind of cook straight into, all of that makes this seem a lot less overwhelming. You could also prepare your canning jars beforehand. I did not get to do that tonight, and guess which step feels a little overwhelming? Now I'm gonna add the beans. These have been cooking for a while. I realized I made a mistake. I wasn't supposed to add the onions yet. I don't think, based on my research, that it's going to affect the safety of this recipe because we are pressure canning today. I would be a little more nervous if we were water bath canning, like making a salsa, but I think it's gonna be fine. So here's the beans, and then we need to add in some water, and it's gonna simmer for a while. I have a grumpy baby who needs a nap, so I'm hoping I can accomplish that while this simmers. You know, I'm not sure this is gonna be enough water. It just called for 2 quarts, and it's not covering the top of these beans. Now, I know from canning beans plain that it doesn't totally matter how much water you add for safety. I think it might have the potential to dilute the flavor, but I'm gonna add a bit more water because they need to boil. All right, this looks a little bit better. At the end of the recipe, it says if you're short of broth, you can just top it off with boiling water. So like I said, I'm not worried about affecting the safety, but I don't want to add too much water because I don't want to dilute the flavor of our final product. But that should be good enough for now. This is boiling now, and so I'm going to add all of the other ingredients. This is a lovely mixture of tomato paste and molasses and garlic, brown sugar, and some spices. These beans did their thing and cooked for 30 minutes. And now I'm gonna start getting the canner ready. I have 3 quarts of water in my pressure canner, and that is according to the manufacturer's directions. So if you have a different brand, read your manual. This is a Presto. And then I always just do a splash of white vinegar. I've heard this helps keep the sides of your jars clean. However, whenever I do a double layer of beans, I always seem to lose a jar. There's always a jar that falls over. Maybe I need to learn, I wonder if there's something I can get to put between the layers so that doesn't happen. So it's more of an even surface, but I always lose a jar and it makes a few other jars gross, but it's worth doing a double batch. So I'm gonna make sure my canner is getting nice and warm. I did put hot water in there so it won't take so long. Back behind me in my sink, I have my jars soaking in hot water. That is my preferred way of heating up my jars. I used to use a dishwasher, but we have more kids now than we did back then, and my dishwasher is never empty. If it were empty, there would be a sink full of dishes. So I no longer use my dishwasher, I just use the kitchen sink. And then I like to just grab a few jars at a time so they don't have much chance of cooling down before I get some hot stuff in there. Then this recipe wants 1 inch of headspace, which is actually quite a bit. I usually like to get my jars close, and then I will go through towards the end and kind of rattle them all down and top any off that are shy of the 1 inch. I got about 14 jars out of that, and I lost my, or rather somebody walked off with my little bubble popper tool. So I'm just gonna use a chopstick here. Go around the edges.
Did you do that?
I am going to wipe the rims with some vinegar to make sure that there is nothing that's going to affect the seal. And then I'm gonna put a lid on. put it on in. Here are all the jars arranged in the canner. We're gonna get a lid on this and it's gonna go. These cook at 10 PSI for 75 minutes. And they take, I mean, that takes a long time. So let's get it going and hopefully we're done before dinner. It is the next day. My husband pulled these out of the canner for me last night because I had to run out of the house unexpectedly. But we just leave them here on the counter. They were covered with a towel all night long and pretty much all of the seals seem good. So to store them, I will just take all the rings off. Some of them have a little bit of, some of them are a little stuck, but, and then I like to just test. You should be able to pick your can up by the top and it should be firm. And then I'll just label them all. I usually do the month that I can them and they will all go on the shelf. And it feels so good to have this project done. Thank you all so much for joining. I really encourage you, if you're looking to save money and reduce your waste, beans are an amazing skill to learn. And at first it feels like a big production, and it sort of is, but it gets simpler and feels easier, and there's a lot of hands-off time. So I will see you all in the next video. Have a great day. Bye.